begins like a quiet secret that no one in the galaxy ever talked about. Far away from Earth, there was a powerful alien kingdom known for strength, discipline, and fearless warriors. Every child born in that place was expected to grow into a strong fighter. Their entire history was built on battles, defense, and pride. In that society, weakness was seen as a burden, something no one wanted to carry. People believed strength was everything. A person's value was measured by how fast they could move, how hard they could strike, and how bravely they could stand in danger. Families trained their children from the time they could walk. The kingdom was filled with training grounds, loud drills, and proud victories. The aliens were not cruel, but their lives were shaped by the idea that survival came only through power. They did not know any other way to live. In the center of this kingdom lived the king, a ruler respected across the galaxy. He was known for his courage and calm leadership. His voice alone could stop arguments. His presence inspired confidence. He was seen as a symbol of perfection in their warrior society. When news spread that he was going to have a child, the entire kingdom celebrated. People imagined that the child would grow into the strongest warrior the galaxy had ever seen. They expected someone who would lead future armies and protect their world. Hopes were sky high, even before the child was born. The king himself dreamed of raising someone brave, someone powerful, someone who would carry the legacy forward. But when the child arrived, everything changed. She was tiny, fragile, and weak. Her skin was pale, her body shook easily, and she could not hold herself upright. Instead of cheers, a heavy silence filled the palace. The royal doctors studied her for days, whispering among themselves. They knew she was not like the others. She didn't have the natural strength their people were born with. She struggled even to move her hands. While other alien children kicked and cried loudly, she lay quietly, barely able to lift her head. The king held her gently, hiding the pain behind his calm face. He loved her instantly, but the truth was clear. She would not survive their world the way it was. As she grew, the difference became harder to ignore. The kingdom's children began training early, learning balance, coordination, and agility. They ran, jumped, and practiced fast movements. Meanwhile, the king's daughter had trouble even standing without help. She fell often, her legs trembling under her own weight. Trainers tried to assist her, but nothing worked. Her muscles were too weak, her breath too short. Doctors suggested treatments, special exercises, and advanced technology, but progress was painfully slow. Some days she could take a step or two. Other days she could barely raise her arms. While others advanced quickly, she remained far behind, unable to keep pace. People in the palace began to whisper quietly in corners. They didn't dare speak loudly, but their eyes said everything. How could the daughter of the strongest king be so fragile? Some believed she was cursed. Others thought she would bring shame to the royal bloodline. No one said these things directly to the king, but he felt the weight of every silent judgment. Each comment, each stare, each rumor cut into his heart. He wanted to protect her from the whispers, but he couldn't protect her from reality. She was different, and in a place like theirs, being different was dangerous. Even as a child, she sensed the tension. She noticed how people avoided looking at her for too long. She saw how other children trained proudly while she sat alone, trying to steady her shaking hands. She felt small, useless, and afraid. She didn't understand why her body refused to work the way others did. She didn't know why she was so weak when everyone else seemed naturally strong. Sometimes she cried quietly at night, hiding her face so no one would see. She didn't want to disappoint her father. She didn't want to be a burden. But she had no control over her body. Every simple task felt like a mountain she couldn't climb. The king tried everything he could. He arranged private lessons with the best trainers. He searched for ancient medical knowledge. He spent hours by her side, encouraging her to move, to breathe, to try again. He wasn't angry. He wasn't ashamed. He loved her deeply, and he believed there had to be a solution. But he couldn't deny the truth. No matter how hard she tried, no matter how much support she received, her body remained weak. The king began to feel helpless, something he had never experienced before. He was used to solving problems with strategy and strength. But this was different. This was his child, and he couldn't fix her pain. As the years passed, the kingdom's expectations became heavier. Leaders of the High Council started worrying about the future. They believed that a weak heir could threaten the kingdom's safety. Enemies might see her as a vulnerability. Rival planets might attack, thinking the royal line was collapsing. The council never said these words directly to the king, but he could read their expressions. He could hear their hesitation during meetings. He could sense their fear. And behind closed doors, they questioned whether she should ever take on any royal responsibility. Some secretly suggested that she be kept hidden forever, so no one outside the kingdom would learn the truth. The king refused to hide her. He refused to pretend she didn't exist. But he also knew they were right about one thing. She could not survive a war. Their world was unpredictable. Conflicts were always possible. The thought of his daughter facing danger terrified him. Every time he watched her struggle to walk, he imagined how quickly she would fall in a real threat. The idea haunted him. He couldn't sleep at night, thinking of her future. He wished he could give her his own strength. He wished he could trade places with her. But wishes couldn't change reality. Despite her physical weakness, she had a gentle and intelligent spirit. She was observant, curious, and thoughtful. She watched others train and memorized their movements. She listened carefully to conversations, understanding emotions more deeply than most of her people. While others focused only on physical power, she learned to read faces, feelings, and silence. She wasn't loud or confident, but she had a quiet strength inside her, something no one noticed because they only looked at muscles and speed. She often sat near the palace windows, staring at the stars, wondering if there was a place where weakness wasn't a curse. She didn't know what she was longing for, but something inside her kept whispering that life could be different somewhere else. Time continued to move forward. The kingdom grew more restless. Rumors of future battles spread through the galaxy. Other planets were preparing for conflict, and the pressure on the royal family increased. Everyone believed the kingdom needed a strong successor. Everyone believed physical strength was their only hope. The king felt trapped between love and responsibility. He knew he couldn't force his daughter to become what she wasn't. He also knew he couldn't leave her unprepared in a dangerous universe. The fear of losing her grew stronger every day. He began spending more time alone, thinking deeply, searching for answers in silence. He reviewed ancient records, old treaties, forgotten histories. He questioned everything he had ever learned about strength. And slowly, one thought began to form something shocking, something unthinkable in their culture. What if strength didn't only come from the body? What if there was another kind of power they had never explored? What if their beliefs were incomplete? For the first time, he considered the idea that maybe their world was wrong about weakness. Maybe there was another path. A path outside their planet. A path that didn't rely on brute force. A path that could give his daughter a chance to grow in a way their kingdom never could. He didn't say anything out loud yet. He didn't share his idea with the council. But deep inside, a seed of decision began to take root. He didn't know where it would lead. He didn't know what price he might pay. He only knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not let his daughter's story end in silence and shame. He would find a way no matter how far he had to go. no matter what it cost to give her a life where she could truly become something more than what everyone believed. And that quiet decision marked the beginning of a journey that would change not only her life, but two worlds forever. Begins with the king sitting alone in his private chamber, staring at the stars through the large glass dome above the palace. The galaxy stretched endlessly, and he thought about the danger waiting outside the borders of his kingdom. Every year, rumors of possible wars grew stronger. Other civilizations watched his kingdom carefully, always seeking a weakness. And his daughter, the child he loved more than anything, remained fragile, unable to defend herself even against minor threats. The king had spent countless nights thinking about her future. He had tried every method known to their people. Doctors, trainers, and even ancient rituals all failed. Nothing could give her the strength that others were born with. And yet, he refused to give up. He could not accept that her life would be limited by what her body lacked. He believed there was a way, even if no one else could see it. One evening, an old scholar arrived at the palace. He was not a warrior, nor someone respected for physical strength. Instead, he had traveled to distant planets, observing different cultures and learning about the ways other civilizations survived and grew. The king had called him secretly, hoping to find a solution the kingdom had never tried. The scholar spoke softly, his voice calm but full of knowledge. He told stories of humans, a race that lived on a small blue planet far from the kingdom. Humans were physically weaker than the aliens. The scholar explained, but they had something extraordinary. They could adapt, grow, and develop abilities far beyond their natural limits. They survived dangerous situations with cleverness, strategy, and most of all, determination. The scholar emphasized that humans had an inner strength that often turned them into warriors, not through muscle or weaponry, but through resilience of the mind and heart. The king listened carefully. A plan began to form in his mind, a plan that was unthinkable in the eyes of his council. He would send his daughter away, not to train with warriors, but to learn from a human. At first, it seemed impossible. Humans were strange to them, fragile in body and simple in appearance. Could a human really teach his daughter anything? And yet, the scholar's stories painted a picture of growth that the kingdom could never provide. His daughter might have a chance at life, and maybe, just maybe, she could become strong in ways no alien training could achieve. The decision was not easy. The king called his council to meet him in secret. Their faces were filled with confusion and disbelief when he spoke. He told them his plan, carefully choosing his words. The council could not understand why he would entrust a royal child to a human. Some whispered that it was dangerous, even foolish. The galaxy was unpredictable, and humans were unknown. They might harm her, or she might fail completely. But the king remained firm. "I have tried every method our people know," he said quietly, his voice steady but carrying the weight of worry. "And I see no future for her here. But perhaps, somewhere else, she can grow beyond the limits imposed on her by birth. I will not let fear decide her fate." No one spoke after that. The council was shocked, but afraid to oppose the king. They knew he made decisions with careful thought, and his word was final. They left the chamber silently, whispering among themselves, unsure whether the choice was wise or reckless. The king began preparations immediately. He could not risk revealing his plan to the public. If people learned the truth, they would accuse him of abandoning his daughter. He wanted to protect her from judgment and shame, even while sending her away. He arranged for a human to receive her, a person known for wisdom, patience, and integrity, someone who would not try to train her with force, but who would help her grow in ways the alien kingdom could not imagine. The day of departure arrived quietly. The princess did not understand what was happening. She felt the tension in the palace, the quiet sadness in her father's eyes. She had never left the palace before. The walls of the kingdom, the sounds of training, the familiar voices, they were all her world. Now she would step into the unknown, into a place she had never seen. The human waited at the edge of the portal, a calm figure in a strange suit that could survive space travel. The princess's heart raced with fear and curiosity. She looked up at her father, unsure if she was supposed to be happy, afraid, or sad. The king knelt in front of her, taking her fragile hands in his strong ones. "You will face challenges," he said softly, his voice carrying both warning and hope. "This path will not be easy, but I believe in you. I believe you can grow into someone no one ever expected. Listen, learn, and trust yourself." The princess nodded silently. She did not fully understand, but she felt a strange warmth in her chest, a spark of hope. She trusted her father, and somehow that trust made the fear a little smaller. The portal opened, shimmering like liquid light. She stepped forward hesitantly, holding the human's hand. The world around her shifted, and in an instant she was gone from the alien kingdom. Her palace, the stars above, the sound of soldiers training all vanished. She was somewhere else, far from home, in a quiet place filled with unfamiliar sights and smells. At first, the human did not push her. He allowed her to explore slowly, to adjust to her new surroundings. She found herself in a small house surrounded by trees and open spaces. The air was different, thicker, softer, warmer. She could feel the sun on her skin, the wind brushing against her face. For the first time, she could move without the pressure of judgment. She could fall and stand again without people watching. The human spoke gently, explaining how the world worked. He did not call her weak. He did not criticize her movements. Instead, he showed her small steps she could take. How to walk properly. How to control her breathing. How to strengthen muscles gradually. He taught her that every small success mattered, and that progress was more important than speed. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The princess began to notice subtle changes in herself. She could stand longer without help. She could lift small objects. Her legs grew steadier, her arms stronger. More importantly, she felt her mind opening to possibilities she had never imagined. She learned that strength was not just in the body. It was in determination, in the ability to focus, and in the courage to try again after failing. She also learned patience. In her kingdom, she had always felt rushed, judged, and compared. Here, there were no comparisons. The human never demanded perfection. He celebrated small victories and helped her see mistakes as opportunities. She began to understand that growth took time, and that fear could be overcome gradually. Every day she practiced, not because someone forced her, but because she wanted to. The princess also discovered emotions she had never fully understood before. The human taught her about empathy, kindness, and observing the world carefully. She realized that even though she had been considered weak, she had unique abilities. She could notice details others missed, think deeply about problems, and sense danger before it appeared. These gifts became her secret strengths, and slowly, she began to feel proud of herself. The first time she ran across a field without falling. She laughed aloud, a sound she had never allowed herself to make in the kingdom. She felt alive in a way she never had before. The human watched quietly, a gentle smile on his face. He did not push her, did not brag about her progress. He allowed her to experience the joy of accomplishment naturally. But the princess also faced challenges. She stumbled often, frustrated when progress seemed slow. She wanted to give up at times, wishing her father's kingdom would have accepted her as she was. She missed her home, her father, and even the palace that had seemed so harsh. The human reminded her to focus on what she could control: her actions, her thoughts, and her persistence. Slowly, she learned resilience, the ability to continue despite fear or pain. One night, She sat outside under the stars, the soft light reflecting on her face. She thought about her father, the kingdom, and the life she had left behind. She realized that the journey ahead would not be easy, but she also understood that she was learning something the kingdom could never teach her. Strength did not only belong to warriors. Strength could grow quietly in anyone willing to try, willing to learn, willing to believe in themselves. And in that moment, she made a silent promise to herself. She would not be weak. She would not let fear or doubt define her. She would grow stronger, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She would honor her father's love and the risk he had taken to give her a chance at life. The journey had only just begun. She was far from home, surrounded by unfamiliar sights and sounds, relying on someone she barely knew. And yet, for the first time, she felt hope. She felt possibility. She felt a spark inside her that whispered, "One day, I will become more than anyone ever imagined." And that spark was enough to begin the transformation that would change her life forever. Begins with the princess settling into her new life on Earth, in a quiet place surrounded by open fields, soft wind, and the gentle sound of nature. At first, everything felt strange. The air smelled different, the sun felt warmer, and even walking on soft grass was unlike walking on the hard floors of the palace. She had never experienced freedom like this before. For the first time, no one was judging her. No one was comparing her to others, and she could take as long as she needed to try something new. Yet, a fear of failure lingered. Deep down, she still believed she might never be strong. The human who had taken her in was patient. He understood that true growth could not be forced, that every small step mattered more than a large, rushed achievement. He began with simple exercises teaching her how to breathe properly, how to focus her mind, and how to move her body in ways that did not overwhelm her. At first, even these small tasks were difficult. She fell frequently, stumbled, and sometimes felt frustrated that her body refused to obey her commands. But the human did not scold her or show disappointment. Instead, he would quietly guide her hand, correct her stance gently, and remind her that every mistake was a lesson. Strength is not just in muscles, he told her one morning as they practiced in the soft sunlight. It is in patience, courage, and the willingness to try again after failing. Those words stayed with her. Slowly, she began to understand that her weakness did not define her. What mattered was the effort she put in, and the lessons she learned along the way. As the days passed, she began to notice small changes. Her legs felt stronger, her arms steadier. She could lift small objects that once had been impossible for her to hold. She began to run short distances without falling. Each little success filled her with a sense of pride she had never known. For the first time, she felt capable. She began to believe that perhaps there was hope for her, that maybe she could grow beyond the limits her alien society had imposed on her. The human also introduced her to strategy and observation. Unlike the palace trainers, he did not focus on raw strength. Instead, he taught her how to watch, how to anticipate movements, and how to make decisions quickly. He showed her that sometimes intelligence could replace power. That knowledge and careful planning could achieve what brute force alone could not. She was a quick learner, fascinated by the idea that her mind could become her greatest weapon. Slowly, she began to see that her unique perspective, once seen as a weakness, could actually become a strength. In addition to physical and mental training, the human helped her develop emotional resilience. He taught her how to remain calm under pressure, how to manage fear, and how to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting hastily. These lessons were difficult at first. She had always been nervous, unsure of herself, and prone to worry. But the more she practiced, the more she discovered an inner steadiness she had never known. She learned that courage was not the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite fear. One day, While practicing in a quiet field, she faced a challenge she had never encountered before. The human had set up a series of obstacles designed to test her coordination and balance. She hesitated at first, her mind filled with doubt. She wanted to give up before even trying. But something inside her, the spark that had been growing ever since she arrived, refused to let her quit. She took a deep breath, steadying her racing heart, and moved forward carefully. Step by step, she overcame each obstacle. When she reached the end, she felt an overwhelming sense of achievement. For the first time, she truly understood that she could accomplish things that once seemed impossible. As weeks turned into months, her transformation became more apparent. Her body grew stronger, yes, but more importantly, her mind and heart grew. She learned to persevere, to analyze situations, and to adapt. She began to understand that strength was not only about fighting, it was about thinking, planning, and staying calm under pressure. She discovered the power of patience, the importance of learning from mistakes, and the value of small victories. The human also encouraged her to explore creativity and problem solving. He would give her small challenges, puzzles, or tasks that required thought, patience, and cleverness. At first, she struggled, frustrated by her slow progress. But as time passed, she began to solve problems more quickly, using her mind in ways she had never considered. She realized that her intelligence and attention to detail could become a form of power, something the palace's warriors had rarely used. This realization gave her confidence and excitement. She felt that she was becoming more than just a fragile child. Social skills were another area where she grew. On her home planet, she had often been isolated, treated as weak, or pitied by others. Here, she learned to communicate, to express herself, and to trust another being outside her family. She discovered the value of relationships built on respect and understanding rather than fear or expectation. She saw that being kind and compassionate could coexist with being strong and capable. One morning, she woke up and realized she could run without thinking, could jump, balance, and move in ways she had never done before. The human watched silently from a distance, letting her enjoy the moment alone. She laughed, a sound full of surprise and joy, and for the first time, she felt proud not because someone told her she should be, but because she had achieved it herself. That day, she understood something crucial. She was no longer the fragile girl who had arrived months ago. She was changing, but the journey was not without setbacks. Some days, her body ached or her mind felt overwhelmed. Fear and doubt returned unexpectedly. She sometimes questioned whether she was truly capable or whether her progress was only temporary. During those moments, the human would remind her gently, growth is not a straight line. Even when you fall back, you are moving forward. Trust the process. Slowly, she learned to see challenges as part of growth, rather than as reasons to give up. She also began to learn the importance of focus. The human taught her that being aware of herself and her surroundings could make a huge difference in any situation. She practiced meditation, concentration exercises, and controlled breathing. These sessions helped her calm her mind, sharpen her reflexes, and prepare for unexpected situations. She noticed that when she focused, her body seemed to respond better. Her movements became smoother, and her confidence grew. A turning point came one evening when a small crisis occurred near their home. A wild animal approached the area, and the princess instinctively reacted. She moved with precision and calm, keeping herself safe and guiding the human's attention to the best way to handle the situation. The human smiled quietly, realizing that she had truly begun to internalize everything he had taught her. She had transformed from someone who could barely move, without help, into someone capable of quick thinking and effective action. The princess began to realize that her time on Earth was not just about survival or training. it was about discovering herself. She was learning to value her mind, her courage, and her resilience. She began to dream about the future, imagining herself capable of defending others, solving problems, and making a difference. For the first time, she felt hope that her life could be meaningful, no matter what the people of her kingdom had once believed. She also developed a deep bond with the human. He never treated her as weak, never forced her to conform to expectations, and always believed in her potential. This bond gave her a sense of safety and trust she had never experienced before. She learned that guidance, patience, and kindness could be just as important as any form of training. Through his teaching, she understood that strength and compassion could exist together. By the end of this part of her journey, the princess was no longer the fragile, timid girl who had stepped through the portal months ago. She had grown physically, mentally, and emotionally. She had learned to focus, to adapt, and to trust herself. She had discovered resilience, intelligence, and courage within herself. Her laughter became more frequent, her steps steadier, and her eyes brighter with determination. And although she was far from her home, far from the kingdom and her father, she knew she was on a path that would change her life forever. She was becoming someone strong, not because others demanded it, but because she chose it for herself. Every small step, every challenge, every lesson had built a foundation for a strength that no one could take away from her. Deep inside, a quiet certainty grew. One day she would return to her kingdom, not as the weak daughter everyone once pitied, but as a fierce, capable fighter. She would honor her father's faith in her, the human's guidance, and her own perseverance. And that day, the galaxy would witness the transformation that had begun quietly, in a place far from home, with patience, courage, and the belief that true strength comes from within. Begins as the princess woke up one morning with a strange new feeling. She felt lighter, more alert, and more aware of her own body than ever before. The months of training, patience, and lessons with the human had begun to take shape in ways she had not fully realized. Her legs felt strong beneath her, her arms moved with purpose, and her mind seemed sharper. It was as if her body was finally learning to listen to her, rather than fight against her. She smiled, feeling a spark of pride and excitement she had never known before. The human noticed her change immediately. "You're ready for something new," he said gently. "You've learned control, patience, and focus. Now it is time to test how far your body and mind can go when challenged." He didn't rush her, nor did he overwhelm her with expectations. Instead, he introduced new exercises designed to improve agility, speed, and reflexes. For the first time, the princess was asked to push herself further than she had ever done before. At first, the exercises were difficult. She stumbled, misjudged distances, and struggled to keep her balance. But instead of feeling defeated, she felt a growing determination. Every fall was followed by careful observation, every mistake by thoughtful adjustment. She began to see her body respond to her will, to cooperate with her rather than betray her. The joy of seeing her own improvement fueled her motivation, and she began to train longer, with more focus, than she ever thought possible. The human also introduced her to combat techniques, not the kind used for violence, but techniques designed to help her react quickly, protect herself, and think ahead. He showed her how to move efficiently, how to anticipate an opponent's actions, and how to use intelligence instead of brute strength. At first, the movements felt unnatural, and she doubted her ability to perform them. But with repetition, guidance, and patience, she began to master them. Her reflexes became faster, her steps more precise, and her confidence grew with every successful maneuver. One afternoon, the human set up a small mock battle course. He used obstacles, targets, and timed exercises to test her speed and agility. She hesitated at first, fear flickering in her chest. What if she failed? What if she wasn't ready? But she remembered the lessons he had taught her about persistence and calmness under pressure. Taking a deep breath, she began the course. Step by step, she moved, adjusting her balance, anticipating each challenge, and keeping her focus sharp. By the time she reached the end, she had completed the course flawlessly. She laughed aloud, amazed at what she had achieved, and for the first time, she truly felt powerful. Her transformation was not only physical. Her mind had sharpened alongside her body. She had learned to think several steps ahead, to analyze situations, and to plan her actions carefully. She realized that intelligence and strategy could overcome physical limitations. Her confidence in her own abilities grew daily, and she began to see that her weakness, once a source of shame, had taught her something invaluable: the ability to adapt, learn, and grow faster than those who relied solely on raw strength. The princess also discovered the importance of observation. The human taught her to notice details in her environment: the way the wind moved, the sounds of distant movement, the shadows cast by objects. These small details, he explained, could give her an advantage in any situation. She began to see patterns and anticipate changes before they happened. This skill, combined with her new agility and reflexes, made her feel more capable than she ever had before. As she trained, she began to test her limits further. She ran longer distances, climbed higher walls, and jumped across spaces she once thought impossible. Her muscles grew stronger, her balance improved, and her endurance increased. Every day she pushed herself a little further, learning that her body was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. The human guided her through this process carefully, ensuring she did not overexert herself, but still encouraging her to challenge her boundaries. Her transformation also brought a change in her demeanor. She moved with more purpose, her posture straighter, her gaze steadier. The nervousness and self-doubt that had haunted her for years began to fade. People who might have once dismissed her weakness would now see determination and focus radiating from her. Though she was far from her home planet, she felt a growing sense of pride in herself and in what she was becoming. One of the most important lessons she learned during this time was patience. Growth, she realized, was not immediate. There were days when she felt slow, tired, or unable to perform even simple tasks. On those days, the human reminded her that patience was as important as effort. She learned to accept setbacks without discouragement, to view mistakes as opportunities to learn, and to celebrate small victories along the way. This lesson, more than anything, began to change the way she approached challenges. The princess also began to develop a sense of creativity in her training. She experimented with different movements, strategies, and techniques, testing what worked best for her body and mind. The human encouraged her to trust her instincts, to explore solutions on her own, and to adapt as needed. This freedom to think independently made her stronger, not just physically, but mentally. She began to feel capable of solving problems in ways she never could have imagined when she was a fragile, uncertain child. Her progress did not go unnoticed by the human. He often watched silently, allowing her to experience her growth without interference. Occasionally, he would offer a word of advice, a small correction, or encouragement. But most of the time, he allowed her to discover her abilities on her own. This approach taught her self-reliance, resilience, and the confidence to trust her own decisions, qualities that would later define her as a fighter. As the weeks passed, her speed, reflexes, and agility improved dramatically. She could now move with grace, anticipate challenges, and respond quickly to changes in her environment. The princess had begun to transform into someone capable of defending herself and others. Her mind had become sharper, her body stronger, and her heart braver. She realized that the princess who had arrived weak and unsure months ago was no longer the same person. One evening, she and the human trained in the fading light. He set up a scenario that required quick thinking, agility, and precision. The princess moved smoothly, reacting faster than she ever had before. Each action was deliberate, each decision calculated. By the end of the exercise, she had surpassed her previous limits. She felt exhilaration, pride, and a deep sense of accomplishment. She realized that all her hard work, patience, and perseverance had begun to pay off. The princess also began to notice subtle changes in her emotional strength. She no longer panicked in difficult situations. She could face challenges calmly, think clearly, and act decisively. Fear was still present, but it no longer controlled her. Instead, it became a signal to stay alert, to plan carefully, and to rely on her training. This emotional growth, combined with her physical and mental development, marked a turning point in her journey. By the end of this part of her training, the princess had become noticeably stronger. Her movements were confident, her reflexes sharp, and her mind keen. She had learned that strength was not only physical, but also mental and emotional. She had discovered that intelligence, strategy, patience, and perseverance were just as important as speed and power. She was no longer the fragile child who had left her home planet. She was becoming a capable, focused, and determined young fighter. And yet, despite her progress, she knew that her journey was far from over. She still had much to learn, many challenges to face, and countless skills to master. But for the first time, she believed in herself. She trusted her body, her mind, and her heart. She knew that one day she would return to her kingdom, not as the weak daughter everyone once pitied, but as someone strong, capable, and ready to face any challenge. The spark of transformation that had begun months ago was now burning brighter than ever. She felt ready for what lay ahead, filled with determination, courage, and a growing sense of purpose. She had discovered that true strength was not given, it was earned, cultivated and nurtured through patience, effort, and belief in oneself. And in that quiet moment, under the fading light of the evening sun, she understood that she was no longer just training to survive. She was training to become someone extraordinary, someone who could overcome any obstacle, protect those she cared about, and prove that even the weakest could grow into the strongest. Her transformation was real, undeniable, and unstoppable. Begins with the princess standing at the edge of a shimmering portal, looking back one last time at the quiet world that had nurtured her. She had grown far beyond the fragile, timid child who had first stepped onto Earth. Her body was strong, her mind sharp, and her heart brave. She had learned patience, strategy, and resilience. She had discovered the strength within herself that no one in her kingdom had believed existed. Now the time had come to return to the place she had once been too weak to face, the alien kingdom. That had been her home. The journey back was quiet. She had traveled through stars and space, her mind filled with anticipation and a quiet determination. She wondered how her father would react, what the council would say, and whether her people would recognize the change in her. She carried the lessons of the human with her, the knowledge that strength came not only from muscles, but from focus, intelligence, and courage. She had grown in ways no alien training could have achieved. When she arrived, the kingdom looked the same as she remembered, yet everything felt different. The familiar walls, the distant sounds of warriors training, and the glittering towers no longer felt oppressive. She moved with purpose, her head held high, her steps confident. People paused and stared as she walked through the gates. Some whispered in disbelief. Some stared in shock. They remembered the weak, fragile princess who had been sent away. The girl before them now radiated strength, focus, and determination. The king had been waiting. He had felt her growth even from afar, sensing through intuition that his daughter was no longer the same. When she stepped into the throne room, he stood silently, watching. His heart swelled with pride and relief. He could see the months of hard work and transformation reflected in her posture, her gaze, and the steady calm of her presence. For the first time, he realized that his decision to send her away had been the right one. She had grown into someone extraordinary. The council, however, was less certain. They had been skeptical, some even critical, when the princess was sent away. They had assumed she would remain weak, that the king had made a mistake. Now, seeing her return, their doubts began to shake. They watched silently as she moved with grace, calm, and confidence. Every action she took seemed deliberate, every step precise. The princess had become someone they could not ignore. Word soon spread that the princess had returned. Soldiers and citizens alike whispered about the change in her. She was no longer the timid, fragile child they had once pitied. She carried herself with authority and calm confidence, a quiet reminder that true strength often begins in unexpected ways. Her journey had transformed her into someone who could inspire others simply by being herself. Her first challenge came unexpectedly. A neighboring civilization had taken advantage of the kingdom's perceived weakness, sending scouts to test the defenses. The kingdom's warriors were ready, but there was uncertainty and tension in the air. The princess watched from the walls, noticing patterns and movements others overlooked. Her mind, trained for months to anticipate and adapt, quickly analyzed the situation. She saw the enemy scouts approach, their weaknesses, and the paths they were likely to take. She stepped forward, offering guidance to the soldiers. At first, they hesitated, unsure if they should listen to someone who had once been considered weak. But her confidence, clarity, and precise instructions left no room for doubt. She guided the soldiers, helping them anticipate the enemy's moves and respond effectively. The attack was small but crucial. Thanks to her insight, the kingdom's forces succeeded with minimal effort, and the scouts retreated in confusion. For the first time, the council and soldiers witnessed the power of her transformation firsthand. The king watched quietly, pride evident in his eyes. He knew this was only the beginning. His daughter had become not only strong, but also wise, capable of guiding others and making decisions under pressure. She had learned that true power came from combining intelligence, courage, and emotional strength. His heart swelled with gratitude for the human who had taught her these lessons, though he also knew that the princess herself had embraced the challenge and grown through her own determination. The princess did not stop with small victories. She continued training, observing, and learning. She worked alongside the warriors, showing them techniques she had learned on Earth, ways to move efficiently, anticipate threats, and adapt unexpected challenges. At first, some resisted her methods, clinging to traditional practices. But when they saw the results, when they witnessed her skills in action, they began to follow her guidance. She earned respect not through intimidation, but through demonstration, patience, and clear thinking. Her presence also inspired others who had once felt weak or inadequate. Soldiers who had doubted themselves now trained harder, seeking to learn from her example. Citizens began to see that strength was not only physical, but could be nurtured through perseverance, intelligence, and courage. The princess had become a symbol of transformation, a living example that anyone could grow beyond what they were told they could achieve. A critical moment arrived when a major threat loomed over the kingdom. A rival civilization launched an attack, believing the royal family's perceived weakness would make victory easy. The kingdom's defenders were ready, but tension and fear were high. The council looked to the king for guidance, and the king, in turn, looked to his daughter. She stepped forward calmly, her mind racing as she analyzed the enemy's movements, predicted their strategies, and calculated the best approach for defense. With quiet authority, she directed the kingdom's forces. She positioned soldiers strategically, identified vulnerabilities in the enemy's approach, and coordinated movements with precision. Her mind, sharpened through months of training on Earth, allowed her to anticipate the enemy's actions faster than anyone else. She stayed calm, focused, and decisive, her confidence giving strength to those around her. The battle began, and the princess moved among the soldiers, guiding them with clarity and determination. She did not rely solely on strength or weapons, but on strategy, observation, and timing. She avoided unnecessary confrontation, focusing instead on positioning, coordination, and efficiency. The soldiers followed her lead, and their effectiveness increased dramatically. The enemy, expecting an easy victory, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. By the end of the confrontation, the kingdom had not only defended itself successfully, but had done so with minimal losses. The soldiers, council members, and citizens alike were amazed. They had witnessed the princess's transformation in action. She had grown from a fragile child into a capable, confident leader, a fighter in every sense, not only because of her physical abilities, but because of her mind, courage, and determination. The king approached his daughter after the battle, his face filled with pride and emotion. "You have grown beyond anything I imagined," he said softly. "You are no longer the child I worried about. You are strong, wise, and brave. The kingdom is fortunate to have you." The princess smiled, grateful for her father's words. She knew her journey was not only about proving herself to others, but also about discovering her own potential. Her return and the battle's success marked a turning point for the kingdom. The princess had not only proven her own strength, but had also inspired others to believe in growth, learning, and transformation. She showed that weakness was not a permanent state, that anyone could grow stronger with patience, perseverance, and guidance. Her journey became a story shared throughout the kingdom, a story of hope, determination, and the power of transformation. Despite the victories, the princess remained humble. She knew her journey was ongoing. She continued training, learning, and guiding others. She understood that true strength required constant effort, focus, and adaptation. And she also remembered the human who had taught her patience, strategy, and resilience. She carried those lessons with her, blending them with her experiences in the kingdom to become a fighter capable of protecting not only her family, but her entire world. By the end of this part of her story, the princess had truly transformed. She was no longer the weak, fragile child who had left her home. She was a capable, focused, and courageous young fighter. She had learned that strength was not only in the body, but in the mind, heart, and determination. She had returned to her kingdom as someone ready to face any challenge, inspire others, and prove that transformation was possible. Even against overwhelming odds, her story had become more than a personal journey. It had become a symbol that true growth comes from effort, learning, and belief in oneself. A symbol that even the weakest could rise to greatness if given the right guidance and the courage to try. And for the princess, this was only the beginning of a future filled with challenges, victories, and endless possibilities. Begins with the princess standing on the balcony of the palace, looking over her kingdom. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the towers and training grounds. She had come far from the fragile child who had once trembled with every step. Now she stood tall, strong, and confident. Every moment of her journey from Earth to the lessons of patience, resilience, and strategy had led to this. She had grown into a fierce fighter, not just in body, but in mind and spirit. The kingdom was peaceful for the moment, but threats always lingered. Other civilizations had learned of her return and her growing skill, and some were uneasy. They wondered if the princess could really be a capable fighter, someone who could command the respect of the kingdom and protect it against any danger. These whispers reached the ears of the council, who had long been skeptical, and even some warriors were unsure. But the princess knew that actions mattered more than words. she began to train harder than ever before. Though she had already achieved remarkable growth, she refused to be complacent. She ran, jumped, and practiced combat techniques daily, honing the skills she had learned on Earth and adapting them to her world. She challenged herself constantly, testing her speed, agility, and endurance. Every obstacle she overcame reminded her of the fragile child she had once been and strengthened her determination to never be weak again. But her training was not only physical. She focused on strategy, anticipating potential threats to the kingdom, and learning how to make quick, effective decisions. She studied patterns of movement, tactics, and scenarios, imagining herself in the middle of battles and figuring out how to react. She realized that her mind was now as powerful a weapon as her body. Intelligence, focus, and calm under pressure were her greatest allies. The princess also mentored other warriors, teaching them techniques that emphasized observation, strategy, and flexibility. At first, some resisted, unable to believe that a young woman, once considered weak, could guide them. But when they saw her skill in action, how quickly she could analyze a situation, and how calmly she could lead, they began to trust her. Slowly, respect grew not just for her power, but for her wisdom and determination. She had become someone who inspired others to be better, to grow beyond their limits. One day, a major threat arrived at the kingdom's borders. A large fleet of enemy ships approached, intending to invade and take control. The kingdom's defenses were ready, but the scale of the attack was daunting. The council looked to the king, and the king looked to his daughter. She felt a familiar surge of determination and calm focus. This was the moment she had prepared for years of training, growth, and learning, all leading to this confrontation. She quickly assessed the situation. Enemy ships were approaching from multiple directions, and the defenders were stretched thin. The princess formulated a plan, coordinating the placement of ships, directing the warriors' movements, and identifying weak points in the enemy formation. Her voice was steady, commanding attention and inspiring confidence. Soldiers followed her instructions precisely, their trust in her unquestionable. When the battle began, the princess moved among the forces like a force of nature. She directed soldiers with calm authority, anticipated enemy moves before they happened, and adapted her strategy as the situation changed. Her movements were precise, calculated, and efficient. She did not rely on brute strength alone. She used intelligence, quick thinking, and coordination to turn the tide of the battle. Even the council, watching from a distance, were amazed at her leadership and skill. The enemy fleet had underestimated her. They expected weakness, hesitation, and chaos. Instead, they encountered precision, strategy, and confidence. The princess used clever maneuvers, coordinated attacks, and well-timed defenses to counter the invasion. Her skills, honed through months of rigorous training and lessons on Earth, were unmatched. The soldiers she had trained and inspired followed her lead flawlessly, and the enemy found themselves unable to gain ground as the battle reached its peak. The princess personally led a decisive maneuver. She anticipated the enemy's main strike and positioned her forces to trap and isolate them. Her knowledge of strategy and timing allowed her to outmaneuver them completely. By the end of the confrontation, the enemy fleet was defeated, retreating in confusion and defeat. The kingdom had been saved, with minimal losses, and the princess had proven her strength in the most visible and undeniable way possible. The celebrations that followed were unlike anything the princess had ever experienced. Soldiers, council members, and citizens alike recognized her skill, courage, and leadership. She was no longer seen as the fragile child of the past, but as a fierce fighter, capable of defending the kingdom and inspiring others. People began to speak of her as a symbol of transformation, a living proof that determination, intelligence, and resilience could overcome even the greatest odds. The king embraced his daughter privately, his eyes filled with pride and relief. "You have become everything I hoped for and more," he said softly. "You are not only strong in body, but strong in mind and heart. The kingdom owes you its safety, and I owe you my deepest pride." The princess smiled, feeling warmth and gratitude. She knew that her journey had been difficult, but it had prepared her for this moment. She had transformed not only herself, but the way others saw her and what they believed was possible. Despite the victory, the princess remained humble. She knew that strength was a journey, not a destination. She continued to train, mentor, and grow, understanding that every challenge would be an opportunity to improve. She also made a point to guide others who had once felt weak or uncertain, helping them discover their own strengths. She understood that leadership was not about showing off power, but about inspiring, guiding, and empowering others. Her transformation had a profound impact on the kingdom. Soldiers became more confident, civilians more hopeful, and even the council learned that strength came in many forms. The princess showed that resilience, intelligence, and determination could rival even the most physically powerful forces. Her story spread, inspiring generations to come, proving that growth was possible when guided by patience, courage, and belief in oneself. In her private moments, the princess reflected on her journey. She thought of the human who had taught her patience, strategy, and perseverance. She remembered the days when she had fallen countless times, doubted herself, and feared failure. She realized that every struggle had been essential, every lesson a stepping stone. Her transformation was not only about physical skill, it was about learning to trust herself, embrace challenges, and persist despite fear. The princess also understood the deeper meaning of her journey. Strength was not only about fighting enemies, it was about leading, protecting, and inspiring others. It was about using intelligence, observation, and empathy to make better decisions. It was about courage in the face of uncertainty and resilience in the face of setbacks. Her transformation was complete, not only in skill but in character. Finally, the princess stood on the highest tower of the palace, looking at the stars. She thought about how far she had come from a fragile child, doubted by all, to a fierce fighter, respected and admired. She knew that the journey was ongoing, that challenges would continue to arise, but she was ready. Her strength now came not only from her body, but from her mind, her heart, and her determination. She had become the fighter she was meant to be. And so, the princess, once weak and fragile, had transformed completely. She had faced fear, doubt, and hardship, and emerged stronger than anyone could have imagined. Her story was no longer about weakness, but about growth, perseverance, and the power of belief in oneself. She had become a true symbol of courage and transformation, showing the kingdom and the galaxy that even the most unlikely individual could rise to greatness with patience, guidance, and determination. Her journey was finished, yet also just beginning. The princess was ready for whatever the future held, ready to protect her kingdom, lead her people, and face every challenge with courage, skill, and unwavering confidence. She was no longer the weak child of the past. She was a fierce fighter, a wise leader, and a living example that true strength comes from within.